Martin McKervey, you're head of manufacturing and a partner at Nabarro. Your presentation, Martin, focused on government procurement, which is one of the 5 pillars of the industrial strategy, and I think often quite glossed over in terms of its importance for developing manufacturing growth. You said that if you look at the EU member states, often the UK stands out as really focusing far too much on cost over quality and local economic benefit. Perhaps you could just expand on that point.
Yeah, sure. I think the key to the procurement process and the key to procurement is to understand where it drives economic activity and growth in the manufacturing sector. I do think it is a stimulus for growth, but I think one of the problems we've suffered from in the past is that our interpretation of the rules has led to a position where the focus has very much been on the lowest cost, as opposed to what is economically advantageous in terms of driving economic activity, supply chain activity, and creating the opportunity for UK manufacturing to embark upon the procurement process in a way that is going to drive growth, innovation, quality in terms of product and price. The aspect of the procurement process that I think brings us into sharp focus is that the EU procurement rules have in effect 2 criteria. One is the lowest cost, the second is the most economically advantageous tender.
Right.
And I think it's in this respect that we find Germany in particular, in a very strategic sense, giving a greater emphasis to the second criteria as opposed to the first, and creating opportunities where the emphasis is on using procurement as a stimulus for economic growth, SME engagement in the supply chain, driving productivity and economic excellence.
Whereas the UK tends to favour a more sort of price over economic benefit approach. Yeah.
Yes.
I suppose the first gut reaction is, are the Germans and perhaps the French misinterpreting the rules, whereas we're playing ball, or are they, cleverly interpreting it within the rules of the game? I mean, are we missing a trick here, or are we just being very good?
I think there is a sense in the UK that we play by the rules and others don't. I'm not convinced by that argument. I think the others interpret the same rules as we do, but they probably do so in a way that is much more geared towards what is in their economic interest and where it fits into a wider economic strategy.
Interesting. In your speech, you said that there are 4 EU procurement rules, a choice of 4, quite simply: open procedure, restricted procedure, negotiated procedure, and competitive dialogue. And it's quite interesting how, of those 4, some obviously are more conducive to an open and more competitive tendering process, which should benefit the supply chain SMEs who are bidding for the work, and others are less so. Can you explain how the UK falls into which? We can probably forecast.
I think of some interesting research done by PwC recently, which I think helps to develop some trends with regards to the various models that you've referred to. In the UK, we have a tendency to rely upon the restricted procedure. Some commentators, economic commentators, would say that that has had a negative impact upon supply chain activity and opportunity. Interesting to look at the preference the Germans have for the negotiated procedure, where the emphasis is very much on collaboration, engagement with the supply chain, consultation, and very much working together. The other interesting dynamic is the use of competitive dialogue. In many situations used for large infrastructure projects, defined in some way by length of time that it takes to work through the process and the cost of the process. And I find it very interesting that used quite a lot in the UK, seldomly used, if at all, in Germany, which I think is another interesting comparison with how different countries are looking at use of different models.
And again, it comes back to perhaps Germany favouring the open procedure more to look out for itself, look out for its supply chain, the companies within its lender structure of local.
And in many German procurement situations, there will be very defined targets with regards to SME engagement, SMEs driving output, SME involvement, which again is part of a wider strategic approach that they often take to how they want to deliver their procurement models.
Interesting. You said in your presentation that several things need to happen. We're at a crossroads on procurement and the interpretation of procurement rules. Will we kill or cure? And you mentioned a few things. We need a clear new UK manufacturing strategy. That one again. We also need perhaps a manufacturing minister. We need to develop the infrastructure of the technology accessibility centres, the catapult centres like the AMRC, which you know very well from your beat in Sheffield. Can you expand on some of these? I mean, why, for example, should the development of the technology access base in the UK favour a fairer or better administered procurement model?
Well, I think the key to procurement, again, we come back to this economic driver for driving economic activity, driving growth. You mentioned the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in Sheffield. A wonderful example, in my view, of the coming together of the world of university, the University of Sheffield, the world of academia, the world of technology, the coming together of the business community, bringing together Rolls-Royce, Boeing, most recently Airbus, and the wider supply chain engagement that type of initiative is driving in terms of assisting, in particular, I think crucially, SMEs to understand where their entry points are to supply chain and global opportunities.
I see. That's well put. That engenders its own collaboration, doesn't it? And just very finally, you mentioned there was a large British infrastructure rail project recently where the government in their tendering, I guess, statement had couched the awareness of the need to do more, to involve more of the economic and social elements of procurement in the way that they phrased the tendering invitation. Can you explain that?
Yes, I think there is no doubt there is a recognition that the Thames Link procurement process was very difficult. And I think the language being used in the context of Crossrail, which will be coming back to the market shortly, I think is interesting. There is perhaps a sense with some of the language being used that in this particular situation we are moving from lowest cost to a situation where with the review of the procurement rules that's going on at the moment, a recognition within government that perhaps we need to be looking at wider economic strands in terms of setting outputs and objectives, in terms of what we want to get from this particular Crossrail procurement exercise, and perhaps the recognition that UK-based companies will be in a better position than previously might have been the case.
And perhaps less focus on the first priority being lowest price. Yeah.
Driving economic advantage.
Well, Martin McKervey from Nabarro, thank you very much.
Thank you.